Welcome to Mindful AI, the podcast where we explore how to create AI that is beneficial to humanity, ethical, and promotes human values and flourishing. Today, we're thrilled to introduce Merve Hickok, a trailblazer in AI policy and ethics, president of the Center for AI and Digital Policy, and founder of AIethicist.org. In this episode, Merve shares her journey from corporate innovation to championing human rights in AI. She dives into global governance challenges and even reveals how scuba diving helps her stay grounded in our digital age. If you find this episode insightful, please subscribe to Mindful AI and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring more of these important and meaningful conversations to you and others.
Okay, welcome to today's episode. Our guest is Merve Hickok, a leading voice in AI policy, ethics, and governance. Merve is the president of the Center for AI and Digital Policy. She's the founder of AIethicist.org and a recognized leader in AI ethics, earning a Lifetime Achievement Award as Women in AI of the Year. So a warm welcome, Merve, to the Mindful AI podcast. We are very, very excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. Okay, Merv, so I think it would be good to touch on how we met. So I was reflecting, and was back in 2020 that I came to a live stream / webinar that a friend of mine recommended me from Felipe Flores. I think was Data Futurologist, the name, and you were the guest speaker. And I was very, very impressed with your talk. I looked into the AIethicist.org, your website, and it really impressed me. All the content that you managed to put together, your story, your journey, your passion for AI ethics, especially back then, was way before the ChatGPT hype, and really inspired me. So, maybe let's start with something about you, perhaps a personal fact or something that we cannot find publicly in your LinkedIn, something that you feel comfortable to share with the listeners.
I'm an avid scuba diver, so I've been doing scuba diving for more than 15 years now. And I think with the crazy work that we do in AI policy and regulatory space and AI ethics at large, I think that's my happy place whenever I can get it to go underwater and stay as much as I can.
Sounds like, it's definitely sounds like a mindfulness exercise in itself. Just be alone down in the water and disconnect.
Yeah, more than 15 years. I don't remember a single dive where I was thinking something above water. But it's definitely, to your point, mindful moment and really fun.
It's such a different world. I only scuba dive a couple of times. I haven't done any training, but I did with someone, manage the equipment, and it's hard not to be present, right? Because it's so fascinating, this world under the water. Thanks for sharing, Merve. So, I'd love to hear your, for the listeners who are not familiar with CAIDP. Of course, I am. I was involved a little bit with you at CAIDP as an organization. So CAIDP, it's a bit of intersection between regulation and legislation. But it would be good to hear from you the why, who, what, how, and when of CAIDP. So, what can you tell us about it, please?
Absolutely. So we founded Center for AI and Digital Policy more than half a decade ago. And to your point, before the current craziness hype with generative AI systems. And our mission was to make AI policy and technology at large more inclusive and bring more accountability and transparency into this. And we have three guiding principles, guiding values on this: human rights, democratic values, and rule of law. So all of our engagements, whether it's education or advisory to governments and international organizations, or advocacy at large, is really to try to influence AI policy and regulations in a way that protects those three pillars. And then we've been like I said, it was when we found it was the right time, the right place for it. So we have been invited as AI expert, like AI policy experts, to the likes of OECD, GPI, UNESCO, Council of Europe, European Union's AI work, etc., just to name a few. And Thing is a rights-based organization, first and foremost. We've been pretty influential. And Natalie, your engagement was with our education programs, our AI policy clinics. So every semester we run this online, free of charge AI policy clinics that bring together many people from like different backgrounds to teach them the fundamentals of AI policy and human rights and establish that language. If I can just do a plug, right now we're in week 2 of our new semester, and we have about 380 people dialing from anywhere from like Jamaica to Canada to Malawi, South Africa, Australia, Japan, anything and everything, every country. And over the years, we trained more than 1,000 people from 120 countries on AI policy.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I had other questions in mind, but I just got distracted with a few things you mentioned there. The word multidisciplinary came to mind. And recalled you mentioning one of your talks that I was listening earlier today when African Union, joined the G7 countries and having more representation, in terms of non-Anglo-Saxon countries when it comes to AI regulation and legislation. So back to the CIDP. So you have academic researchers, advocates, policymakers, a number of principles, value principles, base principles and guidelines. And I understand that your role is also to hold countries accountable in terms of verifying if the principles they signed up for, they're actually implementing and how well. Because, I remember it's a big part of the work that you and Mark do. So that accountability and how many countries are involved. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to dive deeper into that. So our annual flagship report, AI and Democratic Values Index, is exactly what you mentioned, trying to hold countries accountable for their commitments and establish what the country is committed to, what they're actually doing in practice, and establish that gap. We look at 80 countries every year. So there's an annual assessment. In our research group, our AI policy clinic members are a very crucial part of that research. We look at what happened in the previous years in a country for AI policy, AI regulations, etc. And then what is it that the countries actually do? And then we have 12 objective metrics that we analyze each country against. And those include Universal Declaration of Human Rights, OECD AI principles, UNESCO AI recommendations, Council of Europe AI treaty, and then some of the almost universally, I don't want to say approved, but understood or converged principles such as transparency, accountability, independent oversight, etc. So every year we look at 80 countries, ask those 12 questions, we score the countries, and then rank order them into 5 different categories. And then we have a very extensive narrative analysis for each country. So the current report is 1,600 pages. It is the most right now influential analysis of its kind. We're looking at AI policy. And we're currently working on this year's edition that is going to be published in April again. And to your point, it's all about keeping the countries accountable for what they've committed. So, because it's very easy to commit to something, but are you actually implementing it, walking the talk?
Thank you. And before I pass on to Martin, because I kind of can feel that he has a question, maybe, perhaps not.
I have
just,
many questions.
just the independent oversight. I mean, from memory, I think one of the metrics is about do this. Is there independent body, for oversight of the country that is completely independent, which is, I think, is an interesting metric there. Yeah. So over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I just realized I think maybe I'll derail this completely from this topic, but I was just interested in getting to know a little bit about how you got into this field in the first place. What inspired you to focus on AI ethics, and how did this journey begin for you? And as you said, it was very, I mean, AI's been around since, it's been called that for many decades, but it's not been a thing in the view of the public for that long. So what inspired you to get into this field, and how did that journey begin for you?
So it was when I was still in the corporate world, around 2012-13 period. I was in charge of Bank of America Merrill Lynch's global recruitment technologies, graduate recruitment technologies, as well as diversity recruitment. Those two roles don't usually go together, but like for me, somehow I ended up with both of them, and I think it was transformational for me and the work that we've done at the time, because that was when we were starting to see some algorithmic bias emerging. It was not, we were not talking about AI per se, but algorithms in general. And then I was in charge of the technologies, updating them, maintaining them, etc. And then in the meantime, we're trying to attract more diverse graduates to the bank, right, for different roles. Through those conversations, it became clear to me that sometimes what we're trying to avoid with unconscious bias, sometimes conscious bias, that we might be replicating in algorithmic systems, hiring systems, and we might actually be putting additional obstacles in people's way. So I came across a couple of articles on bias in recruitment systems, and was like, this is exactly what I was looking for, and went down a rabbit hole. I was looking at recruitment is one area, but where else could we have algorithmic bias? Turned out that pretty much everywhere. And then at that point, I decided to leave the bank, and I found that took like a couple of years, and I founded aiethicist.org. And I wanted to focus all my energy on AI ethics, responsible AI training and consulting and advocacy at large for social justice.
Yeah, so just a thought occurred to me that there might be people who like certain biases. So I don't know if I heard it yet, but eventually AI is going to be targeted as a woke tool, I guess, because there are political forces that are in favor of certain biases. I don't. Is that something you come across in your work, that people like certain biases and they actually do want to implement them in those systems?
I think there's a lot of that, like I said, there's conscious bias and unconscious bias, and then there's a statistical bias, right? So statistical bias, you're always going to have certain elements of that because of like the discrepancies or imbalances in your data set or how you collect that data, etc. But then conscious and unconscious bias come in when we develop these systems, in the way that we develop, code the systems, in the way that we deploy them. And I think there's always that element of people wanting to verify and validate their own political or social thinking and reflection of that. The best example is what we have been seeing over the years in social media. I think that has touched pretty much everyone who has access to the internet. And it is a global problem of whether we call it bias, or polarization in certain cases. So it is an ongoing problem, and it is definitely replicated in other AI systems as well in different use cases. But for the line of work that I do, whether it's AI policy or AI ethics at large, we're looking at who is being impacted by such biases, in what ways, and how can we avoid that? Like, how can we put safeguards, guardrails in place so it's not up to the developers, for example, or the deployers to make those decisions, but there's more like transparency and accountability for the outcomes and for the people impacted.
So yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Natalie.
Sorry, I'll hand over to you in a sec. So I think something that I wanted to go back to is the global landscape of AI governance. And I remember again, Merve, hearing you talking about hard governance versus soft governance, so hard being legislation and soft. And yeah, because you originally, I don't know, I think you're based in the US. Right now, you're in Japan as of today. You also have an accent there. So, looking at your LinkedIn, it's easy to detect now that you have a different heritage as well. So, I think you are one of the people that asking that question can really give us a reasonable answer. How is the global landscape? Because my understanding is that Europe was leading and Canada apparently as well. Is this still the case in relation to who is actually leading the way in terms of best practice around governance and legislation for AI, ethical AI, responsible AI, which we can try to define later, which is a whole new question itself.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm Turkish by birth, American by marriage.
Okay.
I'm currently doing research in Japan. So trying to cover all bases. But going back to the who's doing the best, I think our results with AI and Democratic Values Index, as per our analysis against those metrics, the likes of Canada, obviously, we're not looking European Union as we're analyzing EU AI Act, but really focusing on the individual countries. So the likes of Germany, South Korea are some of the leading countries in the AI governance space. And I would add, Japan is right there at the top because of what they've been doing since 2016 on the global AI governance conversations. I would still say those are European Union, Japan, and South Korea, and to a certain extent, in terms of regulatory experimentation and regulatory creativity, probably China as well is there. Obviously not so much on human rights, but there is a lot of interesting regulatory work in China as well. I think for Canada, we have seen a bit of up and down. Canada has introduced a lot of interesting regulations over the last few years, especially on algorithmic, automated decision-making systems, public sector accountability on AI, etc. But I think we saw a bit of pause over the last year, and we're waiting to see the results of our annual research this year. But it's a very, very dynamic space. I think the one good thing to see over the years that we have been doing this is now there's a consensus that we need guardrails on AI where there are high risks. So we're not having that conversation of, is AI risky? Do we need guardrails, etc.? So we need guardrails, and I think different countries are trying to figure out what that looks like.
Okay. Maybe one more, Martin, and over to you.
Go for it.
Just was interesting in your comment on China, because when I heard you saying that before, I was like, wow, I confess I was surprised that China was, quite advanced in terms of experimentation around explainability and I think traceability aspects of AI. So yeah. And we mentioned, for those listening who are not familiar with those acronyms, OECD and the EU AI Act, And you just touched on risks now. So I wonder if you could maybe give a very brief explanation what OECD, EU AI Act, and also the levels of risk categories, the unacceptable risk, high risk, and minimal risk. Please, Merve.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe a clarification on the China piece, to your point. The focus in China's AI regulation so far has been private sector. So they're very keen on the current regulations circle around or focus on transparency, explainability of the algorithms, bias in data sets, as well as looking at risks at bigger societal risks, as well as content, synthetic content, generated content, marks, whether it's watermarks or like disclosures. But it's not the same for how the government of China is using its own AI or algorithms, right? So there's a lot of focus on private sector accountability and control and different regulations around that, but we're not seeing the same accountability structure for public sector AI. And there are a lot of human rights and concerns about human rights at large there, obviously. Coming back to what else is happening in terms of like OECD, EU AI Act, if we draw a timeline of AI governance developments over the year, 2016, Japan at the time brought to OECD a concept of like ethics principles or AI principles that would be the basis of governance, global governance. And that almost like kickstarted some of these global conversations. And OECD being the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it is some of the world's biggest economies. They were looking at it from that angle as well. How to support economies, support development, innovation, etc., but also bring a human-centric approach. So between 2016 and 2019, there was a lot of discussions, work group, expert analysis, etc. 2019, they established OECD AI principles, which are a set of principles on like transparency, accountability, human centricity, explainability, sustainability, etc. So like well-being in general. And those became really influential for the following conversations that followed on global AI governance. At the time, some of us at CIIDP were involved in the OECD conversations and pushed for a more protections for individuals. So came up with universal guidelines for AI, which also has like prohibitions and is more focused on human rights and like organizational liability or organizational obligations. So we had universal guidelines for AI 2018, OECD AI principles 2019, and then around the same time, both UNESCO and European Union started their AI governance conversations. UNESCO came up with the UNESCO recommendation on ethics of AI, and it was endorsed by 194 countries in 2021. And then 2021 is when European Union finished all of its like listening sessions, expert sessions, etc. And European Commission came up with the draft of the EU AI Act. And then between 21 to 24, those 3 years were a lot of deliberations between the stakeholders in Europe, between the European institutions, like the Council and the Parliament, etc. End of 24, they finalized the act. So now there is like a union-wide single market regulation on AI in Europe. And within that, there is, to your point, not prohibitions. So Europe said there are certain use cases with AI that we do not want to see in Europe because they so fundamentally undermine human rights and like scientific validity. So things like predictive policing, emotion analysis, biometric categorization, biometric mass surveillance. There are some exceptions, like exceptional use cases, but social scoring, etc. So Europe said, these are our prohibitions. We don't want this in Europe. And then they said, there are also high-risk AI systems, or use cases rather, things like recruitment, healthcare, criminal justice, migration, access to credit, access to education, etc. There's a long list. AI systems used in these use cases, used in these domains, might have the potential to undermine human rights or harm people. So we need some obligations for those who are developing and deploying the systems in the EU in those domains. So the prohibitions with the EU AI Act are going to come into force in a week's time in Europe. So they're the first ones to come into effect. And August, the high-risk AI use case obligations are going to come into effect. And then there are some other further timelines, but I would say yes, right now, EU is kind of leading with that legislative and regulatory approach, and we'll see how the implementation looks like.
So,
Thank you.
what would you say in your view? What are the most pressing ethical challenges in development and deployment of AI today, which would be top of your list?
I would say definitely red lines is top of list. I think European Union definitely had the right approach to determine like some systems, like I said, that have absolutely no scientific validity or are used to like can be used to oppress people's rights. For example, biometric categorization, like using your biometric information, your face, your body, the way that you walk, your whatever, to determine your political leaning, your religious leaning, whether your sexual preferences, etc. Absolutely have no scientific foundations, but can be weaponized against people, right? So I think we need to come to an agreement globally what are some of those systems that should have definitely have red lines. So UNESCO came up with, UNESCO agrees with that. They have prohibition recommendations. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of UN, and the former High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet were very big advocates of red lines where necessary. And so we're seeing those conversations about red lines becoming more mainstream. We need to sort that out. And on the second piece after that is definitely accountability and oversight. I think just like deploying stuff, like very quickly developing systems that can have significant harm and like experimenting and testing on big populations, sometimes vulnerable, like people in vulnerable situations. Those are our biggest problems because we're coming from a fundamental rights approach, right?
Can I switch gears, Martin? We were talking about country legislation or big picture, macro level. And what came to mind, Martin, it's, he wears many hats. And one of his hats, he's a serial entrepreneur, I could say, I guess, in the tech space. So something, again, that I heard you saying in one of the podcasts that I was listening earlier, Merve, is that in the day-to-day can be, although the ownership, now talking about private sector, organizations, corporate, or even startups in the private sector, where who owns AI, right? Where the ownership lies with AI. So I think the first answer is usually the C-level, the big decision makers who decide on the strategy, the AI strategy, and so on. But the reality, I think it is often because of the fast pace and the speed on to market and how much pressure sometimes people on the floor have. Often, data scientists and machine learning engineers, they need to make decisions, and there is no framework, there are no guidelines, and they actually making decisions with unintended consequences sometimes. So Martin, I don't know if you're thinking about your reality day to day with your with your organizations, your startups and things, how all these 1,000 pages framework, because I saw you frowning, how does that translate into day to day of a tech startup, right? So I don't know if something comes to mind, Merve, in terms of when we bring governance to the private sector, small, large organizations, what responsible AI means, anything that comes to mind around my rambling.
Uh, uh, I my position on this is responsible AI and governance makes for better products in the long run, safer, more secure, safer and actually better products in the long run. Yes, if you're in for the short term, you want to get as much as revenue as possible, market share, but you're just focusing on short term incentives. You're going to focus on deploying as quickly as possible and reaching out to as many people as possible. But if you actually care about the long-term longevity of your product, sustainability of your brand, loyalty, reputation, etc., then governance is not a nice to have. It's actually a must have, right? Because there are so many risks that can go wrong. Anything from cybersecurity breaches with generative AI. That space, like cyber threats, surface has expanded exponentially, and other things like hallucinations, bias, etc. We've seen so many incidents of AI and generative AI going wrong because people were more focused on hitting the market first rather than governance. So I think that at this point we have enough evidence to show that governance matters. And the second piece is at a more macro level. My argument is that if you lose the trust of the consumers and the citizens on AI, because they're constantly seeing these incidents, accidents that could be avoidable, then you're going to lose the trust of that population. You're going to have less adoption, less investment, etc. So you're almost shooting yourself in the foot. We are already seeing from public perception surveys in the US, in the EU, Canada, even in Japan here. I was reading a recent one a couple of days ago. People are really concerned about the impact of AI bias or safety, etc., on their day-to-day lives, or how AI is used to make determinations for access to jobs or credits or healthcare, etc. So, and that trend has been increasing. These surveys, we're looking at the longitudinal elements of the survey, and the percentage of people who are more concerned has been increasing year over year. So, like I said, if your company, if your startup is looking at the longer term picture, I think you need to have that investment in governance and start with the right foot.
Do you think there is there a role for AI itself in the monitoring of adherence to these things or detection of biases? Is there actually a role for AI in that process?
No, absolutely. And actually, there are some amazing companies that are focused on, that are building AI products that help with AI governance, risk management, observability, explainability, dynamic governance, etc. So there's a big growing market in that space as well, and getting a lot of seed funding, some of them going for, like, at this point, we're talking about hundreds of millions of investment into these startups. So there's a lot of opportunities in that space as well, because AI is not going anywhere. And AI and statistical systems and big data sets, and like the way that we're building AI systems right now, those risks are not going away. So there's a great opportunity to use AI to mitigate those risks and govern as well.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I was that just came to my mind is when you look at this on the global arena, what differences are there in I mean, cultural and ethical backgrounds and the views of human rights and so on and so forth? Is there challenges from the cultural or regional perspective in what you're encountering?
There are definitely differences in both, cultural differences, philosophical differences, as well as differences in legal systems, right? Even when we're like comparing US to European Union, the legal systems are different. So what you do in one doesn't actually immediately translate to the other. So I think there are mechanisms now to be respectful of those cultural differences, but at the same time move forwards, implementing those like globally agreed upon norms. So transparency might mean different things in different countries, but if you agree upon that as a principle, then you can have different ways of legislating that or putting soft law guidelines in place, and that's a good thing, right? We need that plurality, we need that diversity, and countries coming up with different ideas, as long as there is agreement on those fundamental values, and as long as there is not too much difference between the regulatory obligations between one country and another. I think that fragmentation is risky as well. Like one country doing one thing and the other one is like doing something totally different, then you're going to have issues with businesses or the ability of the businesses to comply. And for example, that was like the whole, or one of the two main objectives of EU AI Act. European Council said, or Commission said, instead of 27 separate countries of the Union coming up with their own AI legislation and creating a lot of fragmentation and complexity, we will come up with a harmonized horizontal regulation. So there's only one AI regulation for the whole market, and if you're a vendor, you can just comply with this one and sell your product across the whole market. So I think we can, again, think of cultural differences and legal system differences from that angle. Doesn't mean that we cannot agree on the principles and norms globally.
And what's your take? Because when just projecting into the future, most of the predictions are either very utopian or very dystopian. It's saving the world or ending the world is what you hear. But what's your take on moving forward? Are you optimistic that we'll be able to get these guardrails in place and benefit from AI? Or
I'm generally an optimistic person in life. I think if you don't see some like possibility in the future, it's really hard to do the work that we're doing. Because it's literally like 24/7. I sometimes am hesitant to turn my phone on in the mornings. What stuff happened overnight. I'm generally optimistic, but I also want to underline that we have human agency, right? There is no inevitability in how we develop, deploy, or govern these systems. We have the final say, or we should have the final say on the whole life cycle of AI, how we govern, how we put accountability and responsibility measures in place. There's obviously a lot of also push saying, let us do anything and everything. I think it's important to kind of go to the roots of the issue and like what are some of the incentives that are pushing those people to say those things, and make it feel like only the experts can talk about the future of AI, or if we regulate or if we put guardrails in place, we're going to kill innovation, etc. What are the incentives from those people who are saying that? Usually not aligned with human rights or democratic values at large. But again, I think we have human agency. For us, it's a matter of getting more people into this conversation, getting more people having a say in how we design and deploy systems, where we use AI, where we don't use AI, and not being just subject to the decisions of powerful companies. I would like to see a future where we're not firefighting the major actors, but actually can have this like space to think about what is the kind of AI that we want, what kind of use cases that we want, and how do we get there, instead of like trying to work around or fight the systems that are in place. Because I think there's a lot of benefits from AI as well. It will be a matter of collectively deciding what that looks like.
Excellent. Thanks, Merve. Thanks for your question, Marvin, because that's the direction that I was going next. So we are great minds think alike. Merve, I want to say that just refreshing the purpose of our podcast is to explore how we can develop AI technology that are ethical, promote human values, and enhance well-being and human flourishing. So although we are very interested in the risks and very much advocates for legislation, regulation, and all those concerns we have as well, we also want to highlight the potential opportunities and the benefits for humanity that are happening already right now, right, thanks to AI. So and it's good to hear that you still an optimist with everything that is happening in the world right now, especially in the US. And I was actually looking at the Bill of Rights, and I went up in the White House page and I got a 404 not found for the Bill of Rights for AI. I was like, I hope this is just accidentally, that.
I was just sorry. I was just gonna say the main concerns there are not AI related at the moment, I would say.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Anyhow, let's put those comments aside. So in terms of AI for good, in tech for good, in AI for good, something that I found on your LinkedIn as well, Merv, was the link to the University of Buckingham about the ethical framework for AI in education. So like you, I'm a part-time casual lecturer as well. I also teach, here at Monash University as a casual. I teach master's students on, professional development and positive psychology. So it's an area that is, dear to my heart as well, AI in education. And back to your point before about having more people having those conversations, I wanted to mention those listening or maybe watching us, the trustworthy AI card. So let's plug in. Merve, if you like to talk about, the project, because it's very impressive what you managed, to put together. So what was the intention? Maybe talk about the concepts, the categories, how people can use this tool, because I think it's very powerful. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And let me grab my good deck from. So the story behind the trustworthy AI cards is I've been running training, responsible AI and trustworthy AI training to both public and private organizations for several years now. And as you mentioned, I teach data science ethics, responsible generative AI, etc., at University of Michigan. And there is this issue of being intimidated by technology by some people, even at higher education, let alone companies, let alone society at large. When you say AI, people are like, I don't code, I don't understand, I'm not a computer scientist, etc. So what I wanted to do with the cards is a couple of things. One, make these concepts more accessible and understandable. So this is 50 cards, a deck of 50 cards. Each card is a different concept, and there's an explanation, definition of that concept. There's a use case example, and then there are several questions on each card that kind of prompts you to think, if you're doing this as a self-learning tool, prompts you to think more critically about, okay, what does this mean to me as a citizen, as a consumer, as a business? So you can go through this 50 different concepts, and as you're going through, it actually establishes the fundamentals of what AI ethics, trustworthy AI is. So I wanted to get more people involved in these conversations, and like I said, have more people have a say in these conversations, because you definitely don't need to be a computer scientist or a developer to be involved in these conversations. And then the second thing, a lot of these questions, like I said, came from my training of these organizations over the years. What I've used in my workshops, what kind of questions kept coming, what kind of questions that we discuss in global AI governance, etc. So it's a very easy, and it gamifies the whole conversation, right? It takes the intimidation away. It's kind of a game thing. And like I said, you can do it individually. So it's a self-learning tool, just go through the questions. Or we now have several organizations training organizations who embedded this into their training programs. So you can have a workshop or team brainstorming, pull a team together and just go through the questions. And you would be surprised how people come from the same question can open up 20 different perspectives. And it's really interesting to watch that process as well, even with people who have nothing to do with AI. Once you talk about implications on business, on society, on their personal lives, etc., it opens up the whole conversation. And then there's also a QR code that goes to my website, aiethicist.org, where I keep a dynamic list of further resources. So it doesn't stop with what's on these analog cards. I keep an updated further resources piece on the website as well that people can access.
Fantastic. Thanks, Meg. I'm very excited. We had a bit of a glitch, but I finally received all the copies. So I have one for Martin and 2 other friends, and we'll definitely make use of that. I just wanted to say there are 5 categories: data, AI, Gen AI, governance, and society. And you find concepts like machine learning, black box, hallucination, explainability, traceability, alignment, technosolutionism, anthropomorphism. So you'll be able to talk AI, after you go through the cards. So it's a whole language and the use case as well. And very, very pedagogic. I don't know if that's the right word. So well done. Great initiative.
Thank you. And yeah, we had a bit of a glitch with the Australian postal service.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's only been October, so maybe 3.5 months since we launched this as a product. And we're now in 5 continents. And already, like I mentioned, we have a lot of individuals going, interested in this, but a lot of organizational interest in embedding into their training systems. And then we also seen some organizations buying them as like employee gifts. Like,
Mm.
even though if we don't have any like AI specific teams, etc., this is one thing that can be used in organizations to like increase the AI literacy and increase those conversations. So there's been some organizations who just like get it as gifts to their employees as well. So pretty happy with the reaction.
Fantastic. Demystify AI.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Maybe you can turn it into a game. No. The AI knowledge board game or something. Version
Trivia. Yeah, trivia. Because we are planning the launch of the Mindful AI podcast, hopefully in April. And we thought that would be a good time to use perhaps with the panel. With Martin will be in the panel. He doesn't know yet, but he will be. But I think we can use the card in many, many different ways. So yeah, very excited about putting that into action.
Thank you.
So Martin.
Yeah, I think we're coming up towards the hour, so maybe
maybe a couple of final questions or comments, perhaps, if I may, Martin, and if you have time. So one of the podcast that I was listening where you spoke earlier, Merve, you mentioned, and sorry if I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, but something around being the right side of history, right? Being the right side of history. And I truly believe, that you are definitely leaving a legacy with the work that you're doing with CAIDP, a very, very important piece of work. Massive, you and Mark and the whole team. I know it's a team effort, but you are leading the team with Mark. So heads off to you. And it's not easy. It's very complex. It's very easy to people say, no, ethics is so difficult because it's so different. We have cultural differences, but no, you are actually facing the challenge and breaking down and see what can we do. Let's break this down. And you've been to the Congress many times, lots of hearings, and I think for those citizens that don't understand what a hearing is about as well, how you can influence as a citizen, your local, government. It's such a massive role model. So how do you feel about what the influence that you are making already, and what this being the right side of history means to you? Maybe if we could close with some words around your thoughts around that and your motivations. Back to Martin's very first question, or what's inspired you to do this work? How do you feel? How long you've gone already? There's a lot of work to do, but you came a long way already. Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that feedback. That really makes my day, and I think it's that kind of feedback and the interest in our AI policy clinics year over year that really keeps us moving forward. A couple of things on like both the legacy piece and looking into the future. We're all wearing different hats and identities at any given time, right? So, for example, we're all here for a podcast, but once we're finished, you step away. You might be using AI or be impacted by AI as a consumer, like from when you're using online services, or your children might be impacted, your parents or your friends might be impacted positively or negatively. If you're working professionally, you might be impacted. So there's so many ways that AI systems impact our lives around the clock, and so many ways that data can be collected and manipulated for malicious purposes as well. So I think that kind of thinking of no one is, no one can step away from the impact of AI. If you flip that coin, everyone should step into the conversations about AI, right? If you're impacted, you should have a say. And one of the things that we been trying to do, both AI ethicists, CIDP, and in all the other conversation, is say, like, voice your concerns, voice your dreams, voice your image of what you want your role to be with AI, whether for professional or personal reasons. The second piece is, I think, not so different, because like it follows up. One of the reasons that we founded CIDP is it started as a project for like our AI and Democratic Values Index. We were, looking at country as a project, like doing those country analysis. But then we also had, like, we were looking at the different international groups, supranational groups, etc., and who was involved in those AI policy conversations. And regardless of the fora, it was the same people again and again. Like, you change countries, you change organizations, but same people are invited to those, right? So that was also another moment for us saying, like, how can we get more public voice into this? How can we educate more people in AI policy so there's more capacity in each country or each community to talk about this? So the clinics, like I said, people come from 120 plus countries. They're lawyers, policymakers, practitioners, technologists, academics, so many different nonprofit, like civil society advocates, etc. And we wanted to be a CIDP. We wanted to like establish this human rights language in AI policy, help people develop the skills on AI policy and research, and then be that multiplier effect across the world. So people, not us necessarily, but people can take that knowledge, can take that network, can take that common language in their communities, countries, and put that to work, right? Over the years, we have so many people who either got into their own countries' national AI strategies or like implementation work after the clinics. We had many civil society advocates who established more connections. There are a couple of examples where people met in the clinics and established their own organizations together, etc. So it's really nice to, I think for us, the big legacy is expanding that space of AI policy and human rights advocates, democracy advocates. And I think, we've been really blessed with the interest. And in the process, we're also learning, right? We have our biases. So having people from so many different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, Martin asked the question about the differences around the world. We are learning. So we're challenging our own assumptions while we're educating as well. And then the last thing I want to kind of maybe finish off is trust and truth, right? I kind of mentioned trust, like if you lose trust of consumers, citizens, etc., investors, we're not going to benefit from this technology or its possibilities the way that we want. But there's also the truth element, and this is becoming more and more of a concern with generative AI, deepfake, coupled with social media and disinformation at large, and new methods and methodologies of spreading disinformation and polarizing information. I ask this question in pretty much every workshop that I run, and maybe I'll put it out here as well, is the both of you, have you started questioning things that the videos, the text or images that you see, like, is this AI, is this AI or is this real?
Yeah, all the time.
Occasionally.
You cannot you cannot trust what you're seeing, what you're listening, what you're watching, unless you are there on the ground actually living it, or unless you have trusted sources that can verify it for you. But we're in that stage right now where truth itself is becoming a contestable concept. And that is very dangerous for the fabric of society, fabric of democracy at large. So again, it's one of those elements where you would like to, we're trying to make an impact. And again, more voices in this space is going to help protect our democratic values and our values at large.
And yeah, and I must say that now this discussion is around ethics in AI, but the importance of bringing clarity and common ground around ethics and human rights and human values and establishing truth and trust, that obviously is much larger than just AI. So I think also the work you're doing, although it's in this area of AI, has much broader ramifications and are conversations that are not held or had enough in any field. So I think from that perspective as well, it's really wonderful to see the work you're doing, because I think it will have impact also beyond AI. So yeah, that's wonderful to see.
Thank you. And if I may, one question that we usually close, Merve, and you already covered that somehow, but we usually ask our guests if they would have one tip or top 3 tips for those consuming AI and those producing AI. So how can they do that? Consume AI more mindfully or produce, AI more mindfully? The AI profession, non-AI profession. If you had some, off top of your head, a tip or advice or recommendation for those, listening to us, being, in the AI space or non-AI space, being consumers only, would you have anything else to add? You already covered a lot, but just in case you have something else.
I think just because we're repeating highlighting the elements of do not get intimidated by this technology. There's a lot of push from some corners to say only experts should have a say in this, but that's not the case. AI impacts us as individuals, our communities, our society at large. So do not be intimidated. It's not hard to get into these conversations, and it's not hard to establish the fundamentals. It's not about coding. It's really about understanding the fundamentals of how data and the structures and design decisions come into place, and the motivations and incentives. So just highlighting that again and again, I think is that, and there are a lot of resources out there. I think when I first started, it was really hard to find resources, and this was obviously pre-COVID, so it was not easy to connect with people online or have these online conversations. But with all the online conferences, webinars, podcasts, online training, etc., I think we have so many different resources as well to, be able to engage with this. So I hope that more people engage in these conversations at large.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Merve. Thanks again for your time and your energy. Really, really enjoyed the conversation. And best of luck with your projects there in Japan. So, safe travels, and maybe we can do another episode later this year.
See what the feedback is. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. It's been very interesting, and good luck with the amazing work you're doing moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and also giving me the space to share some of our work, but being able to put out that call to action as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.